gender identity, gender expression, age, family status, disability, marital status, religion, indigenous identity, political belief, age, criminal conviction. And notably, caste is missing. It's not a recognized enumerated ground of discrimination. So what is the legal recourse for somebody who either in the workplace or if they're applying to be a tenant in an apartment or somebody's basement and is discriminated against because they are of a different caste than their employer or their landlord? What is the legal recourse? How do they take these steps to say, this is unfair and this is not right and I should be protected from this discrimination? What are the legal safeguards? And how can we utilize them? How can we strengthen them? So that's what I'm asking my panel to comment about today. Manoj Bangu, who we referred to earlier, who was the litigant in the BC human rights case that wasn't able to be with us this morning, experienced caste-based discrimination at an office Christmas party in December 2018. And this is the individual that we heard about that had to spend his own money and take this case forward, which takes a lot of bravery and a lot of courage and a lot of time and emotional energy to bring this forward, to say this is not right and it should be protected. And in his case, what happened is that he brought his case based on the issue, the grounds of ancestry, place of origin, religion, but he was subjected to slurs in the workplace that were caste-based, and they were very specific. And that is an act of discrimination and an act of hatred that nobody should have to endure. So we're going to talk a bit about that case. We're going to talk about how to move things forward. So today I have an esteemed panel. I've got academics, labor leaders, and a community activist to help us better understand why legal protections and recognitions are important, and it's the necessary next step in ensuring the safeguards that we need for discrimination on the basis of caste. So I have with me, I'll start at the end there, Janet Andrews, full-time Secretary-Treasurer of the New West and District Labour Council, representing over 70,000 union members in 14 municipalities in Metro Vancouver. Janet is proud to be part of the grassroots local organization with a strong tradition of workers speaking out on issues affecting them in their workplaces and their communities. She's a member of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers Union Local 764 and has been since 1998. She's been active in the labor movement as a steward, bargaining and union committees, and she currently serves on the Executive Council of the BC Federation of Labor, as well as Vice Chair of the Board of Pacific Blue Cross, and Secretary-Treasurer of the Union Protein Project Society. Extremely busy individual. We've heard a number of people talk about allyship with the union movement, and as a labor lawyer, I'm very happy to see Janet here and really appreciate your presence. Jay Birdie, the President of the Chaitanya Association of Canada, and on behalf of everybody here, I thank you for this amazing symposium and all of your work. So he's championed human rights for decades and just helped people connect and become better educated on this very important issue and assisted people in addressing the trauma of caste oppression. And then finally we have Dr. Musa Magasa, who is a scholar, global educator, and human rights activist whose work advances justice, belonging, and social change in higher education and communities. He is the Associate Vice President of Community and Belonging and Adjunct Professor of Education at Mount Royal University, where he leads initiatives on equity and community engagement across the institution. Dr. Magasa previously held senior equity and human rights roles at UVic, my alma mater, and has taught at several Canadian universities. He's born in Senegal. He brings global experience in peace building, conflict mediation, and refugee integration alongside extensive governance and advisory work in the nonprofit and education sector. So please help me in welcoming our panel today. So I'll start my questions with our academic, Dr. Margasa. So I've got two questions for you, and then I will move along here. And I want this to be conversational and informative for our group. Many anti-discrimination laws, as I already went through, already protect categories like race, religion, ethnicity. Why do you believe that caste needs to be explicitly recognized as its own protected category, rather than, as Manoj Bangu did, be covered under existing protections? He was able to bring this case forward. Why does caste have to be its own distinct enumerated ground?
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. I should say, maybe just give a couple of introduction of myself. I'm from Senegal. I was born in Senegal in West Africa. Caste is not just an academic conversation for me. It is a real experience. And I have been really thrilled and humbled by what I heard so far, because just 2 months ago, I had a caste incident in my institution targeted to myself. A community member told to one of my colleagues that they know I work at this institution and my people were the problem in Senegal. Yeah. And I have to explain to this person exactly that it is true, there is a caste problem in Senegal in my ethnic group. My people might be part of it because, there is caste system, and I'm in one of those steps of the caste, but maybe the problem is not, it is simplistic. We have to talk, to have more conversation. But I felt so sad and so heartbroken that this is how this person in the community is describing me, that I'm part of the problem because my ethnic group, we have a caste system. I will leave it there because I should also recognize that, yes, right now in Senegal, in my ethnic group, there have been killings, more than 17 people for the last 2 years, fighting within the ethnic, within the group about caste. Yeah. So this person singling me just really made me very worried what they could do to me if I was face to face. Yeah. So existing categories like race, religion, or ethnicity definitely are important in the protected ground of human rights, discrimination, and harassment. But I should say that caste discrimination does not always fall neatly within them. Two people may share the same nationality, like me and that person I gave you, religion, or we can share the same racial background, yet discrimination can occur purely because of their caste identity. And that's how I felt when this person say I'm part of the problem. When the law does not clearly name a form of discrimination, victims are often struggling to report it, and institution may not recognize it. Therefore, explicit recognition provides clarity and ensures that protection applies to the full range of discrimination people may face. And when I talk explicit recognition, it is explicit inclusion of that protected caste in the protected category will definitely provide clear guidance to the court, to the regulator, to the employers, and to the institutional organization and universities. It will help us to really be able to advocate for caste discrimination and not have to guess if whether it is yes or no. Rather than trying to interpret it, caste, when it is included and recognized, we will just go to it and say, here it is. Recognition also allows institutions to track complaint, to be able to say, this was race, this was gender, this is caste. It helps us to identify the patterns of the discrimination, because we will know how caste manifests in the discrimination issues. It will also help to develop policies and response policies that can not only speak to caste, but, I want to use a legal term of procedure, but I will say response. And when caste is also explicitly recognized, organization and institution will be able to provide tailored training to the real issues. Yesterday we heard, and this morning also, from our keynote from UK, saying that it is when we have this recognition that we can really develop training that is targeted to the key issue and its intersections. When caste is explicitly recognized in our protected ground, it will also help and support to include caste not only in our training but also in our policies with a clear language that is not convoluted and so on. And finally, it will establish clear reporting procedure at the end of the year, like we did here in BC with the race-based reporting. If we have an inclusion of caste, we can also say within the years, you see how many cases relate to caste. And finally, I should summarize and say perhaps most importantly, the recognition of caste in our protected ground will send a message that all forms of discrimination are unacceptable, regardless of where they originate.
Thank you, that's very helpful. I'm going to ask you to continue, and you touched on this a little bit earlier in your introductory comments, but for audiences who may be less familiar with the issue, can you explain how caste-based discrimination can manifest in the workplace, educational institutes, looking outside of South Asia?
Yes, definitely. Migration has really carried socialist structure, including caste identity, into the diaspora communities around the world, as we talked about it yesterday and today. We can't deny that. We are people, when we move, we don't only move the suitcase, we move also everything else. And this is reality, it is here. If I can tell you that I have seen and heard when I used to live in France, I lived in many countries, to be honest with you, France, South Africa, and other places. When I used to live in France, as a student, I worked in a place where I was cleaning windows in the evening. The person the black guy who was hiring, he was hiring based on caste. When the white owner took me to him and said, this boy want to clean the windows, the first thing he asked me is my last name. And I was scared to tell him my last name. I said, my name is Musa. He said, no, I mean your last name. 3 times. And finally, when I told him my last name, he said, you are a noble. I say, yes. He said, you don't clean windows. It's too dangerous. And he put me on the floor. So I had to clean the floor. I can't go there. And that was it. My career as a window cleaner was gone. Just because someone decided that based on your caste, there is a different security level. So in the workplaces or universities in Canada, caste discrimination can appear to exclusion from professional networks, bias hiring decisions, because you are from a caste. Like in my country of origin, a minister, someone was promoted minister, the whole country fought because they say he's from a low caste and he can't be Minister of Social Affairs. So bias hiring decision can also happen here in the workplace. Workplace harassment, as you say, is a case. That lady you talked about, we know that. Or social ostracization, where you just are excluded because of your caste. Because it is often subtle and not widely understood, it can go unrecognized or unreported because people worry. That is why awareness and clear policies, language are important in our institution to talk about what is caste and to frame it in a legal term and add it to the protected ground. Does this answer your question?
Yes, thank you. It's so interesting because many of us or our parents have moved to North America or to Europe in the search of freedom, of equality, of more open-mindedness in terms of society, yet those toxic concepts have followed them despite their better judgment sometimes. And so how do we move past that? Jen, I'm going to move next to you, and maybe you can tell us a bit about how the new West District Labour Council came to be involved and addressed caste as a protected ground. I'm fascinated by this.
Sure. So, yes, I'll start by thanking Jay and the Chetna Association of Canada for the invitation to be here today. Really appreciate all that I've heard, and for me, it's about education. So, and appreciating Jay came to me through a relationship with someone from my union who sits on our board, Lewis McIntyre. So for us, it is very relationship-based. In the union movement as well. I've heard the word solidarity used here several times today, and it's critically important to us. Building solidarity speaks to relationships, and it speaks to trust. So, and I want to also point out too, what it takes to build allies. We say it quite easily like, our allies in this, but to approach someone that you don't know, and so I really want to lift up that, Jay, coming to the union movement when you maybe don't know how you'd be received, and it's sort of like unknown, and I think that that's something we need to appreciate when we talk about rights and we talk about building movements, that there's a lot of vulnerability, and it's important that we recognize that and lift it up as we move forward. So we started a conversation. And for us, it becomes about solidarity and equity. At the Labour Council, we represent about 100 different local unions. As you said, as you heard earlier, 70,000 people. We work closely with our partners in Metro, so that's another 60,000 people in Vancouver. And so that's about 21 cities in the Lower Mainland, about 130,000 union members. And for me, the first thing we had to do is educate. Because for myself, obviously I don't have lived experience of caste-based discrimination, and I know that a lot of our members don't, and so we need to start with education and just talking about it and understanding, and for us I think the understanding is quite simple because it's a barrier. Caste is a barrier to equity. And so for us, once we see that in the labor movement, that's our sort of signal that yes, we'll be on board on this because we defend in the workplace workers' rights. We defend and uphold our responsibilities as unions. And so we brought it forward to our members. We talked a little bit about caste. I personally actually had studied a little bit in school. It had come up for me, so I understood a very little bit about it. But we don't need to understand, and I don't need to have the lived experience fully to understand when people's rights are not being upheld, when people are facing barriers, and when others are putting barriers in their way. And it really struck me what you said, Dr. Magassa, about someone else choosing. When someone else decides for you, that's wrong. You need to have the freedom and the equity space to decide for yourself. So for us, we brought it, we're democratic, it came to the floor of one of our meetings a couple of years ago, and our delegates passed it unanimously, and I'm very proud that there was no question. No one opposed this, no one stood up and said this isn't what we should do. Our folks were very much on board, and so I'm very proud of that, and we move forward on that basis of having it's logged, it was a motion, it was passed. We oppose caste-based discrimination and want to see it in the Human Rights Code.
Thank you. How and which allies whether it be in labor or in community, have you worked with, have you engaged with, have you approached, so that we know sort of where we can also build upon those allies in the community as well? If you don't mind sharing that with us.
In the legislation, it is not in the language. Sometimes victims will go and report an incident and say it is caste. The person who they have in front have a list of protected ground, and then they will say, do you mean it is racism? And the person say, no, I mean it is caste. But this person who listening to you will never understand, because the word caste is not in their vocabulary, and they can't process it because it is not in the list. So the victims of caste discrimination oftentimes not only are victimized, but they are re-traumatized to tell their story, to make themselves understood. And that oftentimes can end up not only re-traumatizing the person, but they end up changing their own story without realizing, because they try to find the key words that will make sense to the other person. Why should we put a victim in that situation? Why should we put someone to be the one to edit their own story when it could just be understood if caste discrimination was added to the legislation? When caste is not named, therefore, what I mean, when caste is not named in anti-discrimination framework, victims, as I say, may not know where or how to report their experience. Institutions may also struggle to categorize the complaint, which can lead to cases being dismissed or misunderstood. I worked for years as a human rights officer for UBC, and I worked in the field of conflict and human rights and child soldier integration around the world, and I can tell you, when people are misunderstood and dismissed, the trauma and the horror that carry on with it, it is for a lifetime. When we can avoid that by just recognizing and having the clear language, because if you don't name things, it is very difficult to fix them. So without clear recognition, it becomes difficult to track also the patterns of discrimination or to implement targeted protection around caste. And finally, I will say that the explicit inclusion of caste as a protected ground will help close that legal gap we talked about.
Thank you very much. You know, as a child visiting my family in India, you can't go to India and not be caste aware, right? It's just like the language is there, the concept is everywhere. I asked my family what people were referring to, and I was given an explanation that, oh, it's the historical jobs that certain people in the village did or certain people did, and they've been generational. And what you realize later is it's not about the jobs. It is not about how much education you can accumulate, how much wealth you can accumulate. The mindset and the concept is that it is in your DNA and it's in your blood. And I know I was told that story to shelter me from the horrors and the evils of the caste system, but it is it's this concept that is beyond that. You weren't able to work as a window washer.
And it was paying more money than working on the floor.
It's not about the job. It's much more than that. And this deserves its own recognition. I want to focus on next steps. I know we've gone a little bit over our time, but this is an important piece here. Janet, maybe I could ask you to talk about what do you see as next steps, your organization, the broader movement, as having caste added as a protected ground?
So I think for us it's building capacity, and we've done that with a lot of other things. And so for us It's sort of a lot like a usual campaign, is that we'll look for our allies, we'll look for the inroads, and we'll go forward. So much as we got parental leave because the postal workers got it into their collective agreement, we'll look at collective agreements, particularly in the public sector. Do we have the ability to get some language into like healthcare or into teaching, or into some of these big collective agreements that can normalize this discussion in the broader community, right? These public sector collective agreements. For us also, we work closely, as I said, with local government. We also work with the provincial government. So we look at like the structures around that. So there's parties. Can we get it through some of the party structures? Can it go to conventions? Can it go to our union conventions? Can it go to political conventions? Can we talk about this at the Employment Standards Coalition? Can we talk about these things in every venue that we're at to build capacity? One, to educate folks that might not know, and two, to build capacity and allyship, to make this movement go forward and to make the conversation more prevalent, because we know that once you get momentum, to get something done, it's always easier. But it would certainly make all of this, the shortcut for this would just be have this a protected ground. It's caste-based discrimination is a barrier. It is an othering, it is a dehumanizing, and so it should be recognized as such under the Human Rights Code, and that would make it then, as has been discussed, a lot easier when we go to an employer to say, well, here's the language around it, because I think that is, you know, even to prove to government, they often like to see, like, where's your cases? But if we can't go and say, here's a case of this because it's been classified as harassment or bullying or discrimination, we can't point to it as having a caste basis, it makes it harder because you don't have that facts and data. And then you have to turn to people who have survived and say, please, open yourself to re-traumatizing, open yourself to telling that story, and we shouldn't have to do that to people who have survived these situations as well. We should be, and that's for me what's so important about allyship, is that to support folks without them having to be subject to re-traumatizing.
That's an interesting point. As a labor and human rights lawyer, workplace investigator, I'm very cognizant of the fact, of the impact of the law on people's daily lives. So, Dr. Magasso, one of the worries that I have is that recognizing caste in the law can still stigmatize people, individuals, or communities. How would you respond to that concern, and while still advocating for stronger protections?
That's a very, very good question, because oftentimes you come across it, people saying, why are you protecting this group, not this group? The woke movement we see today around the world against DEI has that kind of framework. What I say is the goal is not to single out or stigmatize any group. Rather, it is to ensure that the principle of equality, equity, dignity will apply to everyone, and that everyone deserves that. People need to understand that. When in 1982, when the employment equity law came, and that was focusing on 4 groups, those 4 groups could be called being singled out, but it was not being singled out. They were out already. That legislation was bringing them in, was correcting a historical wrong. So I do think that we should also argue caste inclusion as not singling caste out or other groups out, but bringing everyone at the same level of equity and diversity. Anti-discrimination laws have historically expanded a society, and as society will recognize a new form of inequality and inequity, such as gender, disability discrimination. So recognizing caste today and yesterday will follow the same logic. What it means, we just need to strengthen the protection that no one is left without recourse. For me, just to add a couple of things, as someone who works in this field of social justice and DEI and human rights, I will say that if caste is explicitly recognized, organizations like my organization will be able to integrate it into existing diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, in our reporting systems, in our anti-harassment and discrimination training. And I do think that will not be singling any group out, because we already